The sports world has been buzzing non-stop after comments attributed to Andy Reid started circulating in locker room whispers, podcast side conversations, and social media clips taken out of context, creating a storm that nobody really expected but everyone is now talking about. Andy Reid, a name that carries weight wherever football is discussed, especially because of his long and emotional history with Philadelphia, suddenly found himself at the center of a rumor that suggests spoke in a dismissive and critical tone about the Eagles organization. What makes this situation feel heavier is the emotional bond that still exists between Reid and the fanbase that once embraced him for so many seasons. Even though he has built a legendary reputation elsewhere, many supporters in Philadelphia still see him as part of their story, and when a figure like that is rumored to have spoken negatively, the reaction becomes personal rather than professional. According to people closer to the situation, Reid was allegedly reflecting on past experiences, frustrations, and internal decisions that shaped his departure. But those reflections were interpreted by some listeners as harsh criticism rather than honest recollection. This is where speculation begins to grow, because in the world of sports media, tone often matters more than intention. Fans began debating whether Reid was venting, joking, or truly expressing bitterness that never fully disappeared. The lack of a clear clarification only fueled the perception that something disrespectful had been said, and once emotions enter the conversation, rational analysis tends to take a back seat. The story grew legs quickly, spreading from fan forums to talk shows, and the narrative transformed from a casual remark into a perceived attack on the Eagles' identity itself. As the rumor continued to gain momentum, the reaction from the Eagles fanbase became louder and more divided, showing just how complex the legacy of Andy Reid truly is in that city. On one side, there are fans who remember the long years when Reid was the face of the franchise, leading the team through highs and lows, building competitive rosters, and shaping an era that defined modern Eagles football. For those supporters, the idea that Reid would speak poorly about the organization feels like a betrayal, almost as if a family member had criticized the household after moving away. On the other side, there are fans who believe the organization itself deserves criticism and argue that Reid's alleged comments might simply reflect truths that were uncomfortable but necessary. This internal conflict among supporters is what keeps the rumor alive, because it taps into unresolved emotions that never fully disappear. People closer to the league suggest that Reid's words were never meant to go public, which adds another layer of intrigue, since a private honesty often sounds much harsher when exposed to the public eye. The speculation suggests that what irritated fans most was not a single sentence, but the perceived tone of superiority, as if Reid was distancing himself from his past in Philadelphia while elevating his current situation. Whether that interpretation is fair or not almost becomes irrelevant once the emotional response takes hold. In the age of constant commentary, silence is often interpreted as confirmation, and Reid's calm demeanor only added fuel to the fire, allowing narratives to grow unchecked. Behind the scenes, some analysts speculate that this situation reveals deeper tensions that never truly healed between Reid and the Eagles organization. Coaching tenures that last as long as his often involve power struggles, disagreements over personal decisions, and moments where trust erodes quietly over time. Rumors suggest that Reid may have been referencing those moments when he felt unsupported or second-guessed, but fans hearing those reflections decades later struggle to separate criticism of management from criticism of the entire franchise. This is where the emotional line gets blurred, because for a passionate fanbase, the team represents identity, loyalty, and pride. When a former leader appears to challenge that, even indirectly, it can feel like an attack on the community itself. Some voices within sports media believe this controversy says more about unresolved wounds than about anything Reid actually said. The speculation grows when people point out that Reid rarely engages in public negativity, making these rumored comments feel out of character. That contrast is what keeps people talking, wondering whether there is a hidden side of Reid that fans never fully saw. Others suggest that the interpretation might be exaggerated, shaped by rival narratives and amplified by those eager to stir controversy. Still, the damage in terms of perception seems real, because once fans feel disrespect, rebuilding that emotional bridge becomes incredibly difficult. The silence from both sides has allowed imagination to fill the gaps, and imagination in sports fandom can be far more powerful than facts. What adds even more complexity to this rumor is the timing and context in which these late comments surfaced, creating speculation about whether Reid was reflecting nostalgically or defensively. Some believe he was simply comparing organizational cultures, using Philadelphia as a contrast point to highlight lessons learned throughout his career. In that framing, criticism becomes part of growth rather than resentment, but that nuance is often lost in sound bites and second-hand retellings. Eagles supporters who feel irritated argue that regardless of intent, certain lines should not be crossed when discussing a former team that invested so much trust in a coach. Others counter that honesty, even when uncomfortable, should not be censored simply to protect feelings. This debate reflects a broader tension in sports culture between loyalty and transparency. The rumor also sparked conversations about how coaches are remembered and whether success elsewhere changes how past relationships are evaluated. Reid's achievements have elevated his status, and with that elevation comes scrutiny of every word attributed to him. Fans question whether success has created emotional distance, making it easier to speak critically about earlier chapters. Speculation suggests that Reid might not have anticipated the emotional response, underestimating how deeply his words would resonate in Philadelphia. Once the story reached a certain volume, it became less about Reid and more about what fans needed to believe, either to defend their pride or to validate long-held frustrations. This transformation from rumor to emotional battleground shows how powerful narrative can be in sports. As the discussion evolved, content creators and commentators began framing the rumor as a clash between legacy and loyalty, turning it into a broader storyline rather than a simple misunderstanding. Some voices speculate that Reid's comments, whether real or exaggerated, symbolize a final emotional separation between him and the Eagles fanbase. For years, many supporters maintained a sense of shared ownership over his success, quietly celebrating his achievements while remembering his roots in Philadelphia. This rumor disrupted that shared narrative, forcing fans to reconsider whether that connection still exists. The irritation expressed online reflects a sense of loss as much as anger, because letting go of a beloved figure is never easy. Others argue that the reaction proves how influential Reid still is in that city, because indifference would have meant no longer matter. The speculation also touches on how public figures are expected to manage nostalgia, walking a fine line between honesty and diplomacy. Reid's reserved personality makes the situation even more fascinating, since it contrasts sharply with the intensity of the response. Some analysts believe this moment will eventually fade, absorbed into the endless cycle of sports drama, while others think it marks a subtle shift in how Reid is remembered by Eagles fans. Regardless of outcome, the rumor has already achieved something powerful by reopening old conversations that many thought were settled. In sports, the past is never truly gone, and this situation is a perfect reminder of how quickly history can resurface when emotions are involved. In the final analysis of this first wave of speculation, what stands out most is how a few rumored words can ignite such a deep emotional reaction across an entire fanbase. Andy Reid's story is intertwined with Philadelphia in ways that statistics and trophies cannot fully explain, and that emotional bond makes any perceived criticism feel amplified. The irritation among Eagles supporters reflects not just anger, but a desire for respect and acknowledgement of shared history. Whether Reid intended to speak poorly or simply reflect honestly may never be fully clarified, but the rumor itself has already taken on a life of its own. In the world of sports media, perception often becomes reality, especially when fueled by passion and memory. As the conversation continues, one thing remains clear: the legacy of Andy Reid in Philadelphia is far from settled, and every whisper, comment, or rumor has the power to reshape how that legacy is understood. This ongoing speculation ensures that the story will remain alive, debated, and emotionally charged for some time, proving once again that in sports, relationships never truly end. They simply evolve under the weight of memory and interpretation. Moving into the second part of this unfolding speculation, the focus begins to shift from what was allegedly said to why it resonated so strongly, revealing deeper layers of emotion within the Eagles fanbase. Many supporters are not just reacting to the idea that Andy Reid spoke poorly, but to what that implies about how he views his team in Philadelphia. For fans who invested years of loyalty, energy, and belief during his tenure, the rumor feels like a rewriting of shared history. The speculation suggests that some supporters fear Reid is distancing himself from those years, framing them as obstacles rather than foundations. This perception stings because it challenges the idea that success elsewhere was built partly on lessons learned in Philadelphia. In sports culture, mutual respect between past and present is almost sacred, and when that respect appears threatened, emotions rise quickly. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Your support helps us keep delivering the latest updates on our Philadelphia Eagles. And don't be shy, share your thoughts on the news in the comments below. Another angle that fuels speculation is the belief that Reid's comments, if accurately represented, may have been shaped by years of reflection rather than immediate emotion. Coaches who spend decades in the league often reassess their past with a more critical lens, recognizing mistakes, frustrations, and missed opportunities. From that perspective, what sounds like criticism could simply be self-evaluation spoken aloud. However, when those reflections involve a former team with a passionate fanbase, they rarely land softly. Eagles supporters who feel irritated argue that there is a difference between introspection and public critique, even when the latter is indirect. The rumor suggests that fans wanted reassurance that Reid still respects the organization that gave him a platform, regardless of how things ended. Without that reassurance, speculation fills the void, often assuming the worst. Media personalities amplified this tension by framing the story as a rivalry of narratives, turning Reid into a symbol of success who allegedly looks down on his past. Whether that portrayal is fair becomes secondary once it resonates emotionally. Some insiders believe that if Reid were to address the situation directly, much of the irritation would fade, but others argue that addressing it could also keep the story alive longer. This strategic silence adds another layer to the speculation, making fans question whether silence equals agreement or simply avoidance. The conversation also expanded to include broader themes about how former coaches talk about their previous teams, creating comparisons and hypothetical debates. Fans began recalling other figures who navigated similar situations, debating whether honesty should always be welcomed or carefully filtered. In Reid's case, the rumors struck a nerve because of how respected he once was in Philadelphia. The irritation reflects a sense of disappointment, as if expectations of mutual respect were not met. Some speculate that this moment represents a generational shift, where modern fans are less forgiving of perceived slights and more vocal in expressing displeasure. Social platforms magnified every reaction, turning individual frustration into collective outrage. Analysts point out that once a narrative gains emotional traction, facts struggle to regain control. The rumor became less about verifying what Reid said and more about expressing how fans felt. This emotional release can be cathartic but also polarizing, dividing supporters into camps of defenders and critics. Reid, intentionally or not, became the focal point for conversations about loyalty, gratitude, and how legacies are shaped long after someone leaves a city. This complexity ensures that the story remains compelling, because it touches on universal themes that go beyond a single individual. Speculation also suggests that the irritation from Eagles fans is partly rooted in fear of being dismissed or forgotten. Philadelphia prides itself on its passionate sports culture, and any hint that a former leader might minimize that culture can feel insulting. Great success elsewhere has elevated him to a level where his words carry significant weight, and with that weight comes heightened sensitivity to how those words are interpreted. Fans wonder whether their support during challenging years is still acknowledged or quietly brushed aside. This emotional undercurrent drives much of the reaction, transforming rumor into reflection. Some voices argue that the controversy reveals insecurity more than anger, as fans seek validation of their importance in Reid's journey. Others counter that demanding constant validation is unrealistic, especially in a profession driven by competition and change. Still, the speculation persists because it speaks to a human desire for recognition and respect. The story becomes a mirror, reflecting how fans see themselves in relation to the figures they once supported. Reid's reserved public persona leaves a space for projection, allowing fans to assign meaning to silence and second-hand comments. This dynamic shows how sports narratives are co-created by those who live them, not just those who perform on the field or sideline. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to stay updated with exclusive news about our Philadelphia Eagles, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that like button. We can't wait to hear your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next video.